Got your post again.
Oh, nice. Cool. Yeah, cheers.
Jack, your clothes look mental.
What? No, they're not.
I'm not sure he wants fashion advice from us, eh?
They're so tight, doesn't your will get pinched?
Funny kid. Anyway, I have to
Okay,
go.
then.
Nice seeing you both.
Last Stop is a supernatural adventure game developed by Variable State and published by Annapurna Interactive. The game is set in a present-day London and focuses on three main characters, John, Donna, and Mina. John's story is kind of like Freaky Friday, that same vein where he switches body with a neighbor named Jack, and they have to learn how to live each other's lives through the goods and the bads and find ways somehow to switch back to their own bodies. Mina's story is a bit more serious all the way through, as she is a secret agent whose life is crumbling down around her, as someone has found out about her secret affair she is having with a guy down the street, because they left a letter on her doorstep. So to be blunt, you're kind of playing as this terrible person who is trying to find out who sent the letter and shut them up, and this leads Mina kind of to her breaking point. Donna's story is a little more complicated to talk about, but her and her friends, Vivek and Becky, are hanging out at Vivek's dad's shop, and he tells the story about how he has watched this neighbor take girls into this house, but they never come out. So they set out to spy on him to see what he is all about, what he's up to. In doing this, they get caught and get chased by this guy, which leads to Becky knocking the guy out. So not only have the three trespassed on this property, but now they have also assaulted the guy and kidnapped him to keep him from talking. Their story kind of rotates around Donna's personal life and trying to figure out who this mysterious guy is and what he is up to. I thought this game had a lot of humor in it, but almost all of it kind of rotated around John's story. I thought John's story had a lot of good humor, and that was probably the best story in the game overall. And the other stories were a lot more serious, but the game was much funnier than I expected it to be when I started it, because I didn't really know what to expect when I started it. Because I had never really heard of the game, somebody suggested it, and then so I decided to play it. Mina's story I did enjoy, even though it was more serious. I am a sucker for a mystery, and I thought this story did a good job of that, at least, and kept me intrigued throughout. In terms of Donna's story, I do think that story, at least for the most part, was kind of a miss, to be honest. I know that her story is important to the overall story of the game, but I think that it could have been done in a better way to make it more interesting and keep you engaged throughout. But really, most of the time when I got to Donna's story, I was just trying to get it done to get back to John and Mina's story, because those were the much better stories being told, in my opinion. I didn't dislike Donna as a character, and I did feel for her at times in the game, but the story built around her just didn't really click with me overall. It just didn't work. It wasn't a total failure by any means. I just thought it could have been way better, especially comparing it to the other two stories. The voice acting in the game wasn't what you would say top-notch or anything, but it was adequate, and I never sat here thinking that any of the characters were badly voice acted at all, even. Especially John and Jack, who I thought as characters worked very well together. The art style of the game takes a little bit of getting used to, but once I got used to it, I did rather like it. Yeah, background characters have no faces, and it is kind of creepy to have just people lurking around behind you with no faces. And it's something to get used to, but once you do get used to it, I did kind of enjoy it overall. The gameplay of the game is very simplistic, kind of like a Life is Strange or a Telltale game, but probably even lesser than that. But you do just walk around and kind of go through the story that the game is trying to tell. A lot of the gameplay is done through dialogue, where they give you choices on what you want the characters to say. These choices don't really change much, if anything, for the most part, at least from what I could see in my playthrough. Which is one of my big issues with the game, in any game that does this. I hate when a game gives you choices of dialogue that don't really matter at all in the overall scheme of the game. I never expected the game to go in like 100 different directions, like a Detroit style game or anything like that, but just slightly branching paths would have been great to have in a game where you can straight up just be a dick the whole game and nothing changes. There's no consequences to being an asshole. Now, there are choices that matter, but in about 99% of the game, they don't matter at all. So feel free to be an asshole, pretty much. That game's pretty much just feel free to be an asshole almost the entire game, and nothing's going to matter. It doesn't change anything whatsoever. There are a couple of mini games in this game, but not very many, really at all. And the ones that are there are just not very good. They could have probably just excluded them from the game altogether, and no one probably would have missed them or even would have been clamoring for them to be there. There are a couple sections of the game where you chase after people and you mash LB and RB, at least on Xbox, when prompted to keep running. It's very simplistic and not much to it, but you could tell that the developers were not trying to make a game with fantastic gameplay or anything revolutionary. They were just trying to tell the story they wanted to tell, and for the majority of the game, I think they succeeded in doing that, especially for an indie game. In terms of your final score, I do think this game was better than I thought it was going to be, but it was still held back by a lot of things. The exploration not being very good. You were a lot of times just walking from point A to point B. There wasn't a lot of stuff like searching for things, stuff like that. There were sections where you did, but there wasn't enough for my liking because these games kind of rely on that exploration because when you're just walking around, that's all a game like that kind of has. And this game kind of lacked that. The mini games were non-existent and the ones that were there weren't very good. So I think this game could have really used more mini games, better mini games to actually break up the just walking around moving the story forward sections of the game. The choices in the game, dialogue wise, not mattering was also a big issue I had, as I talked about before, because I just feel like in a game like this where they give you choices, the choices should matter. They shouldn't just give you choices to give you choices. They should give you choices because your choices should affect the game. I always feel like this in any game like this. It doesn't matter, indie, AAA, quadruple A, whatever A they're on now. I always think if they put dialogue options into the game, it should affect the game in some way. Even if it's subtly, it should affect the game in some way. Otherwise, why have the dialogue options in there at all? Beyond that, I did like I said before, I did like John and Jack's story. I enjoyed Mina's story, not as much as John and Jack's, but I did enjoy it. And then Donna's story just didn't work for me. It didn't work. I didn't mind Donna as a character, but her story didn't work for me, which I think hurt the overall score of the game, along with all the other issues in the game. So, that being said, I'm going to give Last Stop a 6 out of 10. A game that has potential to be much, much better if they added more kind of mini games, more stuff to do outside walking from point A to point B. I think the game really could have used something like that to really prop it up instead of it just being walking from point A to point B, get to the next story section, walking from point A to point B, and all that stuff, because that does get repetitive, and you don't want your game to be boring, repetitive. Now, luckily, the story had me somewhat intrigued throughout, so I didn't really feel bored. But for some people, just walking around, just walking from point A to point B, that will bore a lot of people. You don't really want to bore your audience. But overall, I think it was fine. It could have been better, but it definitely could have been way worse, too. With that being said, that's going to do it for the review today. Thank you so much for watching. This is a kind of a newer kind of review I'm testing. It's kind of the same as the older ones, but it's more condensed because I'm trying to condense it down when we have all these newer games coming out. Try to get the reviews out faster. Otherwise, I won't be able to get all these reviews out when these ridiculous amounts of games start coming out towards the end of the year. But if you like what you see, please hit the subscribe button, the like button, whatever. If you have any suggestions on how to make the reviews better, how to make them quicker, I would appreciate it. Any advice, we appreciate so much. If you like playthroughs, we have those on the channel. A lot of playthroughs going up right now. There's going to be, hopefully, a lot of reviews going up with all these new games coming out. I'll be working hard at that, and have a few other people help me with those also. But until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time. Bye, guys.